Have you ever wondered or wanted to know if you yourself are an introvert? Well, in this video, I'm gonna cover 5 personality traits that make an introvert. So these are pretty much foundational. So if you don't have these 5 personality traits, most likely, I'm sorry, but you're not an introvert. So if you want to know what these 5 personality traits are, make sure you watch this video till the end, as I will cover all 5 in great detail. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so personality trait number 1 to look out for is your talking to listening ratio. So what I mean by this, throughout the day, you find yourself, surrounded by people. Perhaps because you go to school, or perhaps you go to work, or who knows what you're doing out there, right? But you find yourself that you have to, at some point, interact with people. So when these interactions are happening, what do you do most? Really think about it. What do you do most? Are you the one doing most of the talking, or is it the other person and you're just being a very good listener? Because if you are a very good listener, chances are that throughout the entire day, and this ratio is calculated throughout the entire day, if 80% of the time you're listening to other people, you're listening to them talk, you're listening to them share their emotions, share their experiences, share something about themselves, and you're being a very good listener by actually letting them talk, and then that other 20% is you actually sharing some of your stuff, and you talk about what's going on with you, then most likely you are an introvert. However, if this ratio is on reverse, and you find yourself that throughout the day, you're doing 80% of the talking, and 20% is you listening, most likely you're not an introvert. Because as introverts, we just love to listen. And this has nothing to do with us just feeling insecure or feeling like shy about talking. It's just that we genuinely enjoy listening more than we do talking. And the other reason is because our communication, our way of talking is more calibrated, meaning that we choose our words more carefully. We pretty much try to deliver our message in the most concise and precise way possible, okay? We try to not overuse words, as opposed to an extrovert. You see, an extrovert feels the need to use a lot of words in order to express themselves. They have to say the same thing in very different ways. As opposed to an introvert, the reason why we're able to calibrate it and communicate in a very precise way is because we listen first, and we listen with the intention of understanding the other individual and understanding how they are, how they actually, how they see the world. We want to understand their perspective. That way, when we do deliver the message, it's delivered in a very calibrated way. It's tailored to their personality so that they actually understand much faster what we're trying to tell them, as opposed to an extrovert who just talks and doesn't quite understand the other person. So then in that case, they have to actually say the same message very different ways, hoping that one of those ways actually hits the other person. And unfortunately, sometimes it never does, because they try so many ways, but they never really collected any data from the other individual. So this leads to the extrovert just pretty much sounding repetitive, and the other person just pretty much blocks them out, because it's kind of annoying to listen to a person just say the same thing over and over again in very different ways. So if you are the type of person who generally enjoys to listen to other people, you feel fulfilled when you listen to other people just share, even if they just share their problems or their venting or anything along those lines. If you genuinely enjoy that more than you enjoy communicating, then chances are you're on the path of being an introvert. And another thing to note is that an introvert, when they listen with the intention of understanding, like I said previously, as opposed to the extrovert. The extrovert, when they listen, they're listening with the intention of knowing exactly when it's their turn. So they're waiting until you're done so that they can come in and reply. As an introvert, we listen with the intention of actually understanding, as opposed to the extrovert who listens with the intention of wanting to reply. All right, so the second personality trait that you must look out for to find out if you are an introvert is realizing and acknowledging with true honesty if you prefer alone time over having company. Here's the thing. I want you to put a scenario right now where you're neutral. Okay, so pretty much forget everything that's happened throughout this week. Or if you're watching this in the weekend, forget pretty much everything that happened previously in the weekend. Or if this week is just starting, then forget everything that happened last week, right? And be neutral. Let's just say that right now you're good, right? You're good. You have a set of friends that you can go to. You have the best company possible, and you have your alone time. So, being very honest with yourself, which one would you rather pick right now? Remember, you're neutral, so nothing's affecting you, right? Perhaps last week you were forced to, be part of a convention or be part of something that, you were just very cluttered and you just were not having the best company possible. And so you're just exhausted and you're like, oh, right now, obviously I would pick the alone time because, I've pretty much depleted my entire energy having to speak to a bunch of strangers who I just didn't even connect with, right? Forget all that. If that was the previous week, like I said, right now you're neutral. So nothing's happened. Nothing's happened. You have two choices. You have the choice of spending time with, your best friends possible, your family members, whoever you decide is the best company possible for yourself. They are on this side. You have the choice to go with them. Or you have the choice to go by yourself and go spend that time alone in the best location possible. Maybe that's your house, maybe that's a park, maybe that's the beach, whatever the case may be. But you have the opportunity to go and spend it by yourself. So, to find out if you really are an introvert, look at this decision carefully. So if you chose to go and spend time with the best company possible that you can possibly imagine right now. So maybe that's a combination of your best friends, your best family members, your girlfriend, boyfriend, anything along those lines, right? If you prefer that over your alone time, chances are you're probably not an introvert. However, if you said, hey, they're gonna be around anyway, but right now, I would actually prefer to have the alone time. I would rather just go and chill in silence. I would rather go and read a book, go do something on my computer, work on some project, maybe write a blog, maybe do something, some sort of activity. That's just you. There's nobody around. You genuinely love the solitude. You love the solitude so much that you would rather postpone your best company possible to go spend it by yourself. If that is you, then most likely you are an introvert. You have the personality trait of genuinely enjoying alone time more than you enjoy having company. And there's nothing wrong with this. So please answer this honestly to yourself. Obviously, you don't have to share your answers with anyone. But it is important that you answer these truly and honestly with yourself. Spending time alone is in of itself a fulfillment for an introvert. There's a really good, relaxing, belonging feeling associated with having alone time. There is nothing wrong with it, as opposed to most people, especially extroverts, that say that it's weird, that it's crazy, that it's not normal to just genuinely want to go and spend time by yourself, even if it's like in some alley or it's in some like creepy place, where most likely people wouldn't go and spend time alone. Because believe me, I've done that. Because sometimes I just need to spend time by myself, and that's pretty much everything there is. So I would rather go and put myself in a position where I'm in a little bit of danger, but at the same time, I'm in a little bit of peace because I'm by myself, rather than go into safety where there's a lot of people. Even if it's the best people possible. Sometimes I just need to have that alone time, because as introverts, you understand that it's through solitude, it's through spending time by yourself that you actually build value within your character that you can actually spread once you actually go and have that company. Once you go and you join those group of friends that you love so much, you can actually share some value with them because you accrued value when you were in solitude. So that's the magic of it. So think about this. Think about this truly and honestly. What would you prefer? your solitude, or having company. All right, so personality trait number 3 is the type of activities that you prefer to do throughout the day. So every single activity that you perform throughout the day carries a certain level of stimulation. Now, some activities are very, very high stimulating, and others not so much. So let me explain these. So there's the activities that have a lot of stimulation. So these activities can be concerts, parties, loud music, a high intense amount of people, gathering together for some sort of activity. Maybe it's like a fair, maybe it's some sort of reunion. There's a lot of stimulation involved in there, as opposed to the more low stimulating activities, which could be sitting by yourself, putting on some earphones and listening to some music on low volume. It could be reading a book. It could be writing by hand, writing an essay. It could be doing some research. These are not very high stimulating. There's not a lot of stimulation that's been accrued by you performing such an act, as opposed to the one over there on this side, where you constantly need to be moving. There constantly has to be people, sharing that energy. Everybody has to be in high energy in order for you to feel high energy. So if you want to find out if you're an introvert, check the amount of the type of activities that you do throughout the day, the ones that you genuinely enjoy, the ones that you constantly pursue. If you pursue more of the low stimulating activities, the ones that most likely you're doing by yourself, you're just somewhere alone, you're reading a book, you're listening to some music, you're watching something on YouTube or something, most likely something educational because you want to actualize yourself, you want to actually, grow and learn, you enjoy that, you're writing some sort of essay, whatever the case may be. If these are low stimulating, if you prefer those over the high stimulating activities, like I said previously, partying and stuff like that, most likely you are an introvert. But if you prefer the whole getting together and gathering, and every time there's some sort of activity, some sort of holiday, you feel tempted to start calling all your friends, and you start to tell those friends to start calling other people, and then you try to make it some sort of massive event. That's the complete opposite of being an introvert. That is not what an introvert will genuinely pursue. Perhaps an introvert can go and be part of those activities, maybe by force, maybe because there's an intention behind it. You want to meet someone there or something around those lines, right? Maybe you're doing business, you want to expand it. So in that case, you go and you do it, but you don't genuinely enjoy it. You're doing it because you're pretty much forced to do it in order to produce some sort of result. I'm talking about genuinely enjoying these activities. So if you genuinely just enjoy being by yourself, reading a book, watching videos, not interacting with anyone, and of course by this I mean like you genuinely spend that time by yourself. You don't feel the need, like if you're gonna study, you don't feel the need of having to call your friends and be like, let's do some sort of study group, because study groups are just the worst for introverts. Definitely that's more of a high stimulating thing, because you sort of ping energy throughout the entire group, so pretty much everybody's pulling each other's energy in order to produce a very high energy, right? So introverts don't have the need for that. We just much rather pursue low stimulating activities that don't produce so much stimulation. But funny enough, for an introvert that is enough, because we don't really need that much stimulation in order to produce, in order to stay functional, in order to stay fulfilled really and happy, because that's what it really comes down to at the end of the day. This is why it's so important that you actually understand if you're an introvert or not, because if you understand that you're an introvert and you understand that these are some of the personality traits that you must embrace and adopt if you are an introvert, then this will generally lead you to more happiness, because you will understand exactly what you have to be doing throughout the day and not doing things that are making you feel uncomfortable and that are just sucking your energy, and you just never seem to find the end to it, right? So that's why it's so important. So think about this: stimulation, high stimulation or low stimulation. All right, so personality trait number 4 is really about how analytical and how intentional you are with the activities that you perform throughout the day. So this really means how much do you actually prepare beforehand, before you perform a certain activity. So for the most part, if you think about it, extroverts don't really think too much before they're about to do something. They just sort of throw themselves in there and they pretty much figure it out throughout the way. Perhaps they might encounter a whole lot more mistakes than an introvert will, because the extrovert doesn't really prepare beforehand. There's no research done behind it. It's just sort of like throwing yourself in there and like just trying to figure it out. And of course, if this extrovert is actually smart, they'll probably avoid certain mistakes along the way. They'll figure it out pretty quickly, as opposed to an extrovert that's not so smart. They might encounter so many mistakes to the point where they'll just pretty much end up just quitting altogether. As opposed to an introvert. Yes, an introvert may take a little bit more time before they actually get started. However, this is done intentionally, because an introvert would much rather be more analytical. They would much rather check the data and see what's worked and what hasn't worked before they even attempt to do something, So for example, take maybe making videos like these, for example, like an introvert will most likely try to see how other people do it, how other people, do these type of videos, and see, what kind of gear they use and what kind of style they use and how they share their information here on video. And after doing all that research, they'll be like, okay, I think I'm ready. I think I'm prepared well enough. I think I have an idea of what I'm gonna do. And so because of that, there's already an idea, there's some research behind it. Most likely the introvert will still encounter mistakes. I mean, this isn't a foolproof type of deal here that, an introvert will just, do better just because they've prepared beforehand. It just sort of means that the introvert will most likely encounter less mistakes down the line because they know what to expect already, because they've done the research. So if this sounds like you're the type of person who likes to do the research and prepare beforehand and really analyze and really overthink before you even start, most likely you are an introvert, because that's what introverts do. We like to think a lot. And as opposed to an extrovert, an extrovert will most likely just jump in there, will pretty much assume a lot of things before they even get started. And so this is something that introverts don't do too much, which is jump into assumptions very early. And that applies to everything, every single move that an introvert makes. It's all pretty much done with research, if possible. Of course, there are scenarios where that really isn't possible, and the only alternative is really to assume and just go and throw yourself in there because of the lack of time there is to do any research on the topic or whatever situation. So if this sounds like you, then this may be you. And of course, the other part of it is being intentional with that activity as well. So perhaps an extrovert may just go in there and just do the thing, and they may not even have an idea as to what kind of end result they're looking to produce. They're pretty much just going in there and just, trying it out and just seeing whatever happens. As opposed to an introvert will most likely have an intention behind it. So this applies to any activity. So let's take, for example, maybe playing basketball. So an extrovert will most likely jump into the game, just to enjoy the game, just to have fun, just to see what this whole basketball game is all about. As opposed to an introvert will most likely want to understand this game before he even jumps into it. So be like, what is this basketball game? What's exactly the goal, of the game? So, you'll probably start learning about, how much time each quarter is, what are the rules to the game, how do you actually score points, where should I stand in the field, well, on the court, my bad, when you're standing in the court, how do you dribble, how do you shoot, how do you do certain things right within the game, and what exactly is the purpose of playing this game. In this case it would be to win the game, right? And so when that happens, an introvert will most likely be like, okay, I'm gonna go and play this game with the intention of actually winning this game. I'm not gonna go in there and just randomly start like, you know, bouncing the ball and like not knowing what I'm doing. I want to win the game. Okay, so I'm gonna be constantly checking the scoreboard to see how we're doing. And depending on the scoreboard, we know that's gonna dictate, you know, what kind of moves, what kind of plan we're gonna have. You know, obviously if we're winning by a lot of points, then we're gonna play very differently as opposed to if we're down by 10, 20 points, then, you know, in that case, we're gonna have to play a whole different game. You know, we might have to push more offense in that case, and we have to calibrate as far as like how much time is left throughout the game because we want to win the game at the end of the day. So that's more intentional. Take, for example, reading a book. Most extroverts go into reading books and they don't really have an intention behind reading the book besides just reading the book and letting the book sort of dictate, you know, how they feel at the end of the day. Letting, just sort of immersing into the book, immersing into the adventure and stuff like that. And then nothing wrong with that, but like an introvert will go in with an intention. So like I said, there might be some prior research done with this book and seeing like, okay, people are saying that, you know, you get to learn things like this and this and this, and, you know, you're going to feel a certain way throughout the book. And sort of that pretty much serves as a preparation and excitement to read the book. But then, you know, before we even start reading the book, we have an intention. We're like, okay, I want to extract certain things from this book. Because I don't just want to spend my time and just read this book and not get anything out of it. Obviously, I want to get something out of it. So I'm going to read it with the intention of that. You know, I want to learn, maybe it's a how-to book. Maybe it's a book about business. Okay, what exactly do I want to learn about business? Maybe I want to learn exactly like, you know, what to expect in the first year. So I want to understand what I should expect within the first year of business. So when I go and read this book, I'm going to be looking for, you know, those specific areas and seeing, okay, well, what can I expect in my first year of business, as opposed to just reading the book for the sake of it, you know. So for the most part, introverts will naturally gravitate towards reading books that are more of like how-to books as opposed to like adventure books, which, you know, nothing wrong with those, but adventure books don't offer too much of something that you can go and just take and apply somewhere else. It's more about like just experiencing it and feeling a certain way afterwards. And of course, you know, you can also extract some sort of a value from those books, but it's a little bit harder. You actually have to proactively be looking for that, you know, throughout the book, and that requires a lot more work, but it is possible. And the last personality trait that I want to share with you guys to find out if you are an introvert or not is figuring out where you get your energy from. So as an introvert, you'll be getting your energy from spending time by yourself. That is where your batteries will recharge. That is where you will feel the most fulfilled. That is where you will feel at your maximum. So pretty much take this as when you're charging your phone. So when you plug it into the AC, that's pretty much when you're at home, right? You plug it in and it's pretty much, you know, you can be sure that that phone will not run out of battery because it's connected directly to the AC power. And what I mean by that is that it's connected to some sort of plug, right? So you connect it through the cable and you're charging as you're using it. So you can be sure that that phone will never run out of battery because it's connected, right? And pretty much that's how it works. And then when you go out and you gotta go about your day, you gotta take your phone, you're expending that battery now. So now you're on DC power. So pretty much you're spending power as you're, you know, communicating with people, as you're interacting with the world. And believe me, even if you don't interact with anyone, but if you're surrounded by a bunch of people who are constantly talking and they're talking loud, that in of itself can start draining you massively as an introvert. So if this is you and you know, intentionally avoid crowds because of this fact that as soon as you're in some sort of crowd with a bunch of people, you just start freaking out. You start going a little crazy because you're like, oh my God, there's so many people and these people drain your energy. As opposed to an extrovert. You see, an extrovert enjoys having a lot of people around. They enjoy the communication. They enjoy the reunions. They enjoy the parties. They enjoy the events where there's a lot of people. There's a lot of high energy, right? Because they function in an opposite way. Meaning that they connect to the AC power when they're in those events. So when they're in those events, that's when they're recharging. That's when they're feeling the best. That's when they're feeling pumped because they need that. They need to suck energy from other people who are also in high energy mode. As opposed to an introvert who doesn't need that, actually needs to avoid those type of things, because it's almost like playing a video game here on your phone. The battery starts draining quickly because it's a high intensive activity that phone has to perform in order to be able to give you that experience of playing that game. So you have to be careful when you're like doing something like that, or maybe you're watching a movie or you're watching a show on your phone. Immediately it starts to consume the battery, and that's pretty much how an introvert works. When an introvert is put in a position where, you know, there's a lot of people and there's a lot going on, because that's just how the energy within an introvert actually functions. So you have to be very aware of this and see where you stand, and be very honest, of course, with your response. You know, perhaps all this time you've been an extrovert because you constantly need to be with other people. You need to be constantly hanging out with other people. You need to constantly be interacting with other people. So if you're the type of person who starts to freak out when they don't have anybody to talk to, or you constantly need to be calling people on the phone in order to, you know, feel some sense of like, you still have people to talk to, then most likely you're not an introvert, because you still feel that need to be out there interacting with people. If you're an introvert, you realize that talking to other people starts to deplete you. So you cannot spend too much time with people, which is why introverts, for the most part, it does not mean that we're just like loners, right? That we just spend time by ourselves all the time. No, it means that an introvert will be a lot more selective as to where they decide to go and expend their energy. So if you're an introvert, or perhaps you're not an introvert, but you're trying to understand how an introvert functions. If you have an introvert in your life and you see that that introvert is proactively wanting to engage with you and is actually putting in that work to talk to you, be very grateful for that. Because, like I said, an introvert realizes and knows that the more they talk, the more they start to deplete. However, there is a way to recharge when this is happening, and of course I've spoken about this in my channel. You can go ahead and check that video out separately, but it's about you listening. When an introvert listens, they start to recharge. That's like you know, finding some sort of a AC power when you're out there. You know, you get lucky, you're able to connect your phone and charge it for a little bit. You know, you don't get to charge it fully, but you get to charge it partially. That happens when an introvert actually gets the opportunity to listen to somebody else. But other than that, just realize that an introvert is very selective. So if you're one of those people that introvert has selected, then feel very honored. Feel very honored, because that introvert actually values you, and values you to such a degree that they're willing to, you know, expand some of their energy with you. And of course, you know, if you have any introverts in your life and you see that, you know, randomly they just have to pretty much go and spend time alone, is because they've been depleting a lot of energy, or perhaps it's the environment that's depleting them, and so they have to get some sort of a, you know, relief somewhere. And so Alright guys, so that's the end of the video. I hope that by now you understand the 5 personality traits of an introvert, and that you now know for a fact if you are an introvert or you're not. So if you didn't check all 5 of the personality traits that I shared with you in this video, you can be sure you're not an introvert, okay? You do not qualify to be an introvert. Not that it's anything bad, but now you know for a fact that you don't qualify as an introvert. So perhaps you should now start pursuing extroverted pretty much information that can help you embrace your extroversion, because there's nothing wrong with being an extrovert. However, I'm not going to sit here and give you information about how to be a better extrovert, which I can, but I won't, because I myself am not an extrovert. I'm an introvert, and that's who I've been for the past few years. And not only that, but I've actually embraced my introversion, and I've actually performed and lived my life as an introvert, you know, staying within the guidelines of being an introvert. And believe me, it's been great once I've embraced my introversion, because you build a really good foundation from there. And then from there, you can obviously, you know, step into like extroverted territory. You can start doing things that extroverts would do, but of course, you always have your foundation. You understand yourself, and so that's pretty much the cool part about it. And obviously, if you're an introvert and you did qualify, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Make sure you check out the videos I have in this channel, because they will help you massively to really expand your potential as an introvert. So thank you very much for watching this video. Subscribe, hit the like button, and comment down below if there's something else you want to add to the video. Now, obviously, these were just 5 personality traits. These are pretty much the traits that I thought were the most important as far as being an introvert. So obviously there is more to an introvert, but you know, these are my top 5. So I hope you guys enjoyed them, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.